Well, 2 years ago, Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor announced New Zealand would stop exporting live animals by sea. He said it posed an unacceptable risk to our reputation in a world where animal welfare was under increasing scrutiny. But now there's a plot twist, because National announced this week that it wants to revive the practice. So MP for Selwyn and National spokesperson for animal welfare, Nicola Grigg, joins us from Christchurch. Welcome, Nicola. It does
morning.
Good morning. It does. I just want to ask you quickly, resurrecting live exports seems a little counterintuitive as a campaign for the animal welfare spokesperson.
Yes, and I can entirely understand why, but the fact of the matter is that there are out in the industry at the moment good operators and bad operators, and MPI has been operating without any formal regulatory framework, and operators are operating without any formal regulatory framework. So hence the bad ones do slip through the cracks, and I do want to acknowledge New Zealanders do have quite a bit of concern around this industry. Okay. We've all seen some horrific imagery of cattle on boats up to their knees in excrement and so on. And of course we've all heard about the Gulf livestock sinking, but I would say that that was a boat that was not a custom-built boat. It was not operating to any formal legislative requirement, and it was a dreadful maritime disaster in which 2 New Zealanders lost their lives.
Certainly, Nicola. And when you say there are some bad operators out there, and that you don't like these boats, these converted container ships that are shipping our animals, and you say ways that compromise the animal welfare of those animals on board. But 90% of the animals that we exported to China in 2022 were on those boats. 90%. Are they all bad apples?
I wouldn't say they're all bad apples, Rebecca,
well,
but
I hope not.
As I said earlier, look, nobody's had any stringent regulations they've had to stick to. So if we were to form a government, we want to amend this Animal Welfare Amendment Act that has banned the trade, and we would implement what's called a gold standard. We've been working really, really closely with the Australian exporters on this, and they've implemented it themselves. And the bottom line of that gold standard is that only custom-built ships can land in New Zealand and depart with our animals on board. And I went up to Napier just last week and got on board a Dutch-built vessel called the Galbra Express, and it's a $100 million custom-built ship. And honestly, I was so impressed with it that I've got absolutely no concerns now at all about the safety and welfare of our animals being transferred by sea. And on it we saw, special drain. But only 10% of the animals that go to China go on those boats. So why are we out here defending and promoting that 10% of the industry if 90% of the industry is not getting it right and putting animals in those horrific conditions? Oh, look, I totally agree with you, and it comes down to cost. There are good exporters and good importers who are prepared to go to the expense of using these particular ships, and at the end of the day they will be the only ships that are allowed to land here. And you've got to look at the big picture, I think, as well, about China's demand for our protein. And the Chinese government, as I understand it, can only sustainably feed about 60% of its population, so they're looking to grow.
But these are arguments put up by the industry as to why it's important to keep it going, but I'm interested in how you are going to do that in a humane way as the animal welfare spokesperson. And so you want to set up monitoring, this gold standard, as you call it. You want to set up monitoring for the tens of thousands of animals for their 3-week voyage at sea, for their time in Chinese quarantine when they arrive in multiple ports right across China, across their transport, sometimes for hundreds of kilometres, to the place where they will eventually land, these farms, which could be spread right across China. You want to do this for 130,000 animals that were done last year. But you're basically setting up a New Zealand regulatory framework in China.
Yes, we are, and that's to do with our trading relationship with China. As I just said, China wants our protein, so I do believe that China will meet the expectations that we are looking to implement. I don't for a minute believe that all animals are treated badly in China, and actually I do challenge that perception, because New Zealanders have got to start asking themselves why they think that. The farms that I've observed, and I've certainly committed to the industry that were I to be... Beg your pardon?
You've been to the farms in China?
I haven't been. I was just about to say, were I to be the Minister for Animal Welfare, I will go up to China and have a look at these farms for myself. The other thing that we would implement, apart from regulating for the custom-built ships only, is an importer licensing regime whereby Chinese importers, Chinese farmers who want our product, have to be certified by MPI that they meet animal welfare standards. So that includes food provision, water provision, the safety of the animals, shelter and so on and so forth. They will be accredited by our MPI. No, I just want to finish this, sorry, Rebecca.
Certainly.
They will be accredited by our MPI staff in country, and then we can further overlay that with an international accreditation agency like Quality Assure. And so then New Zealanders will have comfort in the fact that New Zealand stock going up to China are going to be treated to the same conditions as they would on farm here in New Zealand.
Well, this is a huge logistics exercise that we're talking about now, both here, but mostly in China, which is another sovereign country which doesn't have any animal welfare laws, as you'll be aware, Nicola. Is it realistic? Is the Chinese government on board? Because MPI says it doesn't have jurisdiction and cannot require a verification of animal welfare after the animals arrive.
Yes, but it can require it, if these farmers and importers were to be seeking certification to import our animals. And equally, there's opportunities for MPI to work in with our offshore counterparts, particularly on the likes of Chinese quarantine facilities, as you've suggested. And again, I just want to push back on this perception that Chinese farmers are cruel to their animals or the Chinese system is cruel to its animals, because I think that is a massive, massive assumption.
Well, that's not a perception, it's just a fact that there are no animal welfare laws in China, something that you will be aware of.
But nor are there in America. That's the interesting thing. There is not an Animal Welfare Act in America, and yet New Zealanders don't seem to mind our animals going up there. So you've really got to question our underlying assumptions here.
Do we export live animals to America? We don't, do we?
Not as far as I'm aware,
no,
but that's the point.
So that is the point.
People don't challenge it.
But that's because we're not exporting them there, Nicola. How many MPI officers do you think is going to be required to set up this operation in China?
I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head, sorry, Rebecca, but look, we have people in our posts around China, and it's very easy to get them up into market if we were to go through this first round of auditing and certification and accreditation.
And how long, Nicola, do you think it's going to take to get those custom-built boats up and running?
Well, there's already 15 of them operating by this one particular Dutch company that I've met, and I think there's about 20 worldwide. And they need also some surety from the New Zealand government that we are going to continue this so that they themselves can continue the investment in these, as I said, $100 million ships, so that we can lead the world in showing everybody how we can safely and humanely transfer animals by water.
And why do we want to do that exactly when our trading partners and competitors actually in the trade space like Australia and the UK are looking at banning or have plans to ban the live export trade too?
Well, a couple of reasons. All of our trade partners export live animals. Nobody that I'm aware of is actually looking to ban it. The Australians have suggested banning the live exports of sheep up into the Middle East, which New Zealand would agree with, given we've already done it. But they won't ban the live export of cattle. The Labor government in Australia has committed that to the cattle industry. The other part is we have an enormous problem now here in New Zealand with an excess of 130,000 bobby calves a year, which are access to the internal supply system. Now, these tend to be the second-tier grade of genetics and livestock that, at the moment, quite frankly, are going to be culled. Why would you not take this opportunity to give these animals a long and productive life by putting them on a boat, a custom-built boat, where they're treated really, really well on the water up to the destination farm, where, again, they're treated really well on a destination farm so they can live a full and productive life and feed a nation that is looking looking to build its rapidly growing population with good, safe, healthy New Zealand protein.
This sounds exactly what the industry is saying, Nicola. But I just have one final question for you, which is a real pinch point, I think, for animal welfare, people who have concerns around animal welfare, is when they're slaughtered, will you also be regulating that and monitoring and inspecting that they are only slaughtered, you know, say 4 or 5 years from now in a humane way? Because there's no requirement for China to do that at the moment.
No, that's not quite correct. The Chinese abattoirs, as I understand it, operate to the same system as New Zealand abattoirs.
It's encouraged, but it's not required.
Yeah, but they are stunned before they're killed, like they are in New Zealand.
Not always, though, Nicola. That's what the monitoring and regulation would probably achieve.
Well, I haven't been made aware that it's not always. I've been made aware that they do euthanize to the same standards as New Zealand.
OK, well, maybe we'll look into that. Good luck with the plan, Nicola. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Nation.